A bearded man in jeans and a flannel shirt walks casually past a military formation at Fort Liberty. Nobody salutes him. No senior officers stop him. Every sergeant major who sees him knows exactly who he works for, because that man just returned from a mission you'll probably never hear about. And the regular Army allows him to look like this for a reason that makes more sense than you'd think. Delta Force operators are U.S. Army soldiers who almost never look like Army soldiers. Long hair, beards, civilian clothes, and deliberate rejection of military appearance regulations define the unit's visual identity. This isn't rebellion. It's a calculated operational decision that separates Delta from every other unit in the American military. Army Regulation 670-1 governs the appearance of every soldier on active duty. Hair length, beard style, authorized uniforms, approved insignia. Every detail of how a soldier presents themselves is controlled by this regulation. Every American soldier must comply with AR 670-1, except Delta. Delta operates under a blanket exemption authorized by JSOC. The Joint Special Operations Command grants the unit authority to completely ignore standard Army appearance regulations. New operators are told to stop shaving and grow their hair out on day one. The transformation from conventional soldier to Delta operator begins with abandoning everything that makes you look like a soldier. The operational logic is straightforward. Delta missions require blending into civilian populations in the Middle East, Central Asia, Africa, and Latin America. A clean-shaven, high and tight haircut is immediately identifiable as American military anywhere in the world. It's a visual signature that compromises operations before they even begin. Beards carry significant cultural weight in Pashtun and Arab communities. In many parts of Afghanistan and Iraq, a bearded man commands more respect and draws less suspicion than a clean-shaven one. An operator with a full beard who speaks Pashto or Arabic can move through Kabul or Baghdad far more effectively than someone who clearly looks like American military. During operations in Afghanistan, Delta operators frequently wore shalwar kameez, the traditional Afghan dress, with Western tactical vests concealed underneath. In Iraq, they wore civilian clothing with customized tactical gear that didn't match any standard military issue. In Africa and Latin America, they dressed like contractors, aid workers, or local civilians. The unit provides operators with a clothing and equipment budget for personal sourcing. There is no standard Delta uniform, because standardization defeats the purpose. Operators wear what works for the specific mission environment. A Delta team operating in Yemen will look completely different from a team operating in Colombia. Mission dictates everything. Regulation dictates nothing. This philosophy creates inevitable friction with the conventional military. Delta operators regularly get stopped and confronted by senior NCOs on conventional bases. A sergeant major sees a bearded man in jeans walking across Fort Bragg, assumes he's a civilian contractor who wandered into the wrong area, and demands to see identification. Operators carry identification letters that essentially say, "Don't ask questions, he's authorized at levels you don't have clearance for." But confrontations still happen. A sergeant major with 20 years of service enforcing grooming standards can't just ignore what looks like a flagrant violation of everything the Army stands for. The tension reveals a fundamental difference in philosophy. The conventional Army builds cohesion through uniformity. Everyone looks the same. Everyone follows the same rules. Everyone wears the same uniform. This creates unit identity, enforces hierarchy, and builds organizational discipline. Delta builds cohesion through shared selection, shared missions, and shared accountability. The first weeks at Delta are described as psychologically disorienting for conventional Army transfers. Everything you learned about being a soldier, everything that defined military professionalism, suddenly doesn't apply. You show up to your first day at the Delta compound, expecting the typical military environment. Instead, you see operators in jeans and t-shirts, guys with beards that would get you court-martialed in a regular unit, and an atmosphere that feels more like a private security contractor than the Army's most elite fighting force. This philosophy traces directly back to Charles Beckwith, who founded Delta Force in 1977 after serving on an exchange program with the British Special Air Service. Beckwith spent time embedded with the SAS and observed how they maintained non-military appearances for operational effectiveness. The SAS wore civilian clothes in Northern Ireland during the Troubles for surveillance and intelligence operations. British soldiers needed to look like civilians to move through Belfast, Derry, and other contested areas without being immediately identified and targeted. The principle was simple. If you look like military, you can't operate effectively in a civilian environment. Beckwith brought this principle to Delta from day one. When he was building the unit's structure and culture, he deliberately rejected the conventional military model of strict uniform standards. He understood that the missions Delta would be tasked with required a different approach. Compared to other Special Operations Forces units, Delta has the most extreme autonomy. Green Berets get some relaxation in grooming standards, especially when deployed and working with indigenous forces, but they generally remain closer to AR 670-1 compliance. Navy SEALs get grooming relaxation during deployments, but face more institutional pushback and are expected to return to standard appearance when stateside. DevGRU, the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, commonly known as SEAL Team 6, has similar exemptions to Delta. But DevGRU has become more publicly known due to media exposure from operations like the Bin Laden raid. Delta's anonymity is more extreme and more deliberately maintained. Delta operators are forbidden from talking to the press. They don't write memoirs. They don't appear on podcasts. The unit's operations remain classified long after other SOF missions become public knowledge. This culture of absolute secrecy extends to their appearance. You could walk past a Delta operator on the street and never know it. Here's the claim that might spark debate. Military appearance standards are fundamentally about institutional control, not operational effectiveness. For 99% of the Army, haircut regulations and uniform inspections serve an important purpose. They build discipline, enforce hierarchy, and create unit cohesion. But for Delta, discipline comes from an entirely different source. It comes from knowing that mission failure could mean American deaths. It comes from the selection process that only accepts the top 1%. It comes from operating in small teams where every member's competence is essential to survival. An operator who can't grow a beard doesn't become less disciplined, but he does become less effective in environments where beards are culturally expected. The question becomes, what matters more? Looking like a soldier or completing the mission? The Army made its choice when it granted Delta the exemption. Mission effectiveness trumps appearance standards. The results speak for themselves. Delta has conducted thousands of operations across dozens of countries, many of which will never be publicly acknowledged, with success rates that justify the unconventional approach. When every mission might require posing as a civilian, an aid worker, a contractor, or a local national, the ability to blend becomes more valuable than the ability to pass a garrison inspection. Standard Army uniform actively works against operational objectives. So when you see that bearded man in jeans walking across Fort Liberty, now you understand why nobody stops him. He's not violating regulations. He's operating under a different set of rules, authorized at the highest levels of Special Operations Command, because his job requires invisibility that standard military appearance could never provide. The mission dictates the appearance, not the other way around. And for Delta Force, the mission will always come first.